Children all over the world love to play with toys, but sometimes toys can be a bit creepy. Stay tuned to the end to see a doll that attracted quite a lot of controversy. If this is your first time visiting The Things, then give this video a big thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Today we are going to show you 20 creepiest toys no kid would want as a present. Face bank. Money boxes are useful, and an old-fashioned piggy bank is a great way to teach kids how to save. However, this money box gave us the shivers. It's called a face bank, and its name suggests it's a money box, but it's shaped like a face, and you put coins in its mouth. It's battery-powered, so you can see it eat the money. There is something pretty unnerving about it. It's got an odd, blank sort of expression, and you could imagine a kid actively not wanting to save its pocket money rather than having to deal with it. Little Miss No Name. It's good to teach children to have compassion for those less fortunate than themselves, but back in the 1960s, doll makers Hasbro came up with a toy that ended up creeping us out. They decided to design a doll that was homeless, and her story was that she had been abandoned. They called her Little Miss No Name. You can see that she is skinny, dressed in rags, and she is crying. If we had been given this toy as kids, we aren't sure whether we would have tried to make things right for her by showing her love. We feel like we'd probably scream and run away. Hopping Lederhosen. A little wind-up toy is a traditional staple of any child's toy basket, so it's pretty cool to see how one company used modern technology to bring it to a new generation. Unfortunately, it's been done in a way that's rather weird and pretty disturbing. The toy is a pair of lederhosen-clad legs, and you can use a knockwurst-shaped remote control to get them hopping over you. Doesn't it look like the weirdest thing ever? But that isn't the only creepy thing about it. You see, these aren't just hopping lederhosen legs. No, this messed up toy yodels at you as well. Swimming doll. There's a belief that things were better made way back in the Victorian era. In a lot of cases, that might be true, but sometimes things that might have looked appropriate then no longer look appropriate in the modern day. This French toy is a great example of such case. You were given a key, and when you turned it, the doll looked like it was swimming, except it was doing it on dry land, not water. When we look at the toy now, it just looks really odd. It looks a bit like it had all its limbs removed and put back on the wrong way. Fearsome Flush. If you were a kid growing up back in the 1980s, then the chances are you know what a big deal the real Ghostbusters was. The cartoon spin-off from the classy, spooky action comedy was everywhere. While there's going to be a bit of spookiness with anything to do with Ghostbusters, we think that this takes things too far. It's a toy of Fearsome Flush, a villain from the show. Basically, it's an evil, haunted toilet, and it's got eyes, teeth, and a tongue too. Who you gonna call? Definitely not a disturbing toilet toy. Hugo, man of 1,000 faces. In the modern world, we realize that it's okay if boys play with dolls. However, back in the 1970s, it was looked down upon. But did you know that some toy makers tried to break the mold even back in the day? However, in this case, they just gave us something disturbing. Hugo, man of 1,000 faces, was a bald male doll, but with a big range of wigs and accessories so he could look however you wanted him to look. Unfortunately, we think that most of the looks he had were less fun and more creepy. However, we might be in the minority here. That's because this strange, rare toy actually sells for quite a lot on internet auction sites. Baby Laugh-A-Lot. The idea of a demonically possessed evil doll is something that is a little bit of a horror movie cliche that has maybe even lost its impact. However, when we saw this next toy, we got scared all over again. It's called Baby Laugh-A-Lot, and it's genuinely spooky. As its name suggests, it's a doll which laughs. However, there is something really weird and creepy about it. It rocks back and forth, all while issuing a high-pitched laugh, which we'd say sounded more like a cackle. It came out in the early 1970s, so we wondered if it may have inspired any horror films. No thanks. We'd rather not get this as a present.
Just push the button and she starts to giggle.
My First Bacon. Unless you don't eat it because of religious or dietary reasons, we think there's a good chance you like bacon. So what could be better than a toy bit of bacon for your child? Well, as it turns out, quite a few things. This is a plush toy which is supposedly streaked with bacon. However, it doesn't quite look like the color of any slice of bacon that we have ever seen. And it has got eyes and a mouth too. But worst of all, when you hug it, it says, "I'm bacon." Maybe the makers of this toy didn't actually want kids to eat meat in the first place. Darr Bears. Did you have a teddy bear when you were a child? We certainly did, and we think that you and a lot of the people you know did too. However, we hope that your teddy bear was nothing like this next collection of bears. Here they are. Pretty scary, right? We aren't entirely sure what it is about them that freaks us out so much. Perhaps it's the oddness of their fur, or maybe it's the way their faces look less like bears and more like people. Either way, we think that they are just way too creepy. We definitely wouldn't want to get a toy like that as a present. Teddy Ruxpin. Back in the 1980s, Teddy Ruxpin was a very popular toy. It wasn't that big for that long, but there was a period of time when almost every kid had him or wanted to have him. He was a bear who read stories. You put a cassette in his back, pressed play, and he'd read them to you. However, looking back on it, it was pretty creepy. It was a combination of things, really. Firstly, there was the way that he stared out at you that was worrying. If you added that to the way that he would read out to you, then it was the sort of thing that could easily give a child nightmares. Furby. Some toys become genuine pop culture phenomenons. One great example of this was the Furby. If you were a kid back in the 1990s, we think that you would have had one of these. They were like an animatronic pet. You had to look after it, and it would talk to you. Looking back on it, it was a pretty big surprise that we weren't more creeped out by our Furbies. Think about it, they looked a bit odd. And they talk a lot. There were even reports that they used to turn themselves back on, even after they were switched off. Like we said, spooky. Struts. We think that it's fair to say that My Little Pony was and is a genuine pop culture phenomenon. The toys have inspired several generations of games, TV shows, and even movies. But when something becomes popular, it's not uncommon that things inspired by it follow the lead. That's what happened with Struts, which were like My Little Pony, except a bit more creepy. They aren't as cartoony, so they have the unintentional result of looking a bit like the sort of big horse that would pick on the little ponies at school. We can't quite put our fingers on it, but they definitely creep us out. Cyclops Brain Baby Stroller. When a baby gets a little bit older, it will often end up being taken out in a baby stroller. They are usually fairly nice and everyday things. That is why we felt a little bit icky by this thing that's supposed to be a device for babies. It's a baby stroller, but it doesn't look like one. What it looks like is a brain, but not just any sort of brain. If you look around the front, it's a head, but the head only has one eye, so it's a Cyclops Brain Baby Stroller. We don't know if it's completely horrible or secretly pretty cool. Mexican Jumping Beans. Kids quite often like toys that are a bit unusual and a bit active. Something that fits the bill was a toy that was a pretty big hit back in the 1980s and the 1990s called the Mexican Jumping Bean. They were like little beans that somehow mysteriously jumped. They were really using magnetic forces. However, real jumping beans do exist, but they are a bit different. They are beans, which have had moths lay eggs into them, and when the eggs hatch, the movement of their larva makes it look like they are jumping. We think that is pretty gross. Mickey Mouse. Perhaps the most iconic and recognizable cartoon character in history is Disney's Mickey Mouse. He's been entertaining children since 1928, and we hope he continues to do so. He's inspired a lot of merchandise, which is usually pretty cool. However, there's one time when we pretty much wish that he hadn't, and that's for this toy. It was made by a company called Dean's Rag, but he doesn't quite look like the Mickey that we all know and love. He seems a bit too thin, and his eyes and teeth make us feel very weird and very uncomfortable. Vending Machine Toy. Miniature toys, or the sort of thing that's a cross between a key ring and a toy, are pretty cool, and it can be fun to try your luck and get something fun from a toy's vending machine. However, this toy isn't that sort of thing we want to see when we open a capsule. It comes from Japan, and we think its appeal must be lost in translation. We think it's probably an alien of some kind, but what makes it creepy is its color pattern. It looks like it's got the same sort of color as human flesh. Creepy Robot. There's a word for things that give an impression of what people from the past thought the future was going to look like. The word is retro-futuristic. Normally, things that are retro-futuristic are pretty cool, like an old episode of The Jetsons. This toy is retro-futuristic, but not in a good way. Take a look at this robot, and we think that you'll agree that it looks pretty scary. It has bright red, staring eyes. That's bad enough. But take a look at its mouth, and in particular, its teeth. We can't think of any scenario when we would feel happy playing with it. Breaking Bad dolls. Breaking Bad was a genuine TV phenomenon, and it generated its own line of merchandise. These included action figures based on the show's two main protagonists, Walter White and Jesse Pinkman. They were actually pulled from Toys R Us shelves in Florida after a petition accused them of promoting illegal activity. We know that they weren't intended for kids, but we think that dolls are usually kids' toys. When you think about these dolls, you'll hopefully agree why we are putting them in here. We don't think that children need to be subjected to the sort of things that happened in Breaking Bad. Pregnant doll. It's fair to say that no one here would have been alive if they had not been born. However, when one toy manufacturer came up with this next toy, there was controversy. It's a pregnant doll, and it comes with a baby that you can remove from its stomach. Nope, we're not kidding. While childbirth is an incredibly beautiful thing, some people thought that this doll was just a little bit too much for young children. We really want to know, what weird toys did you play with when you were a child? Don't be shy. Let us know and tell us in the comments. And that's it for 20 creepiest toys no kid would want as a present. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.